Welcome to the Creating Your Conditions podcast, a work of understanding the conditions we are given, the conditions we create, and the conditions we have yet to achieve. You can find us at Creating Your Conditions on Instagram. And my name is Vin. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I am your host. In today's episode, I am interviewing Jay or Jandel, who is a clinical psychology doctoral student in San Francisco. And they identify as Filipino-American, and they use they, them, theirs pronouns and are non-binary. They also hold a master's in school counseling and a bachelor's in psychology. They have been working as a teacher for numerous years in between and during schooling, so they have been passionate about the needs, especially the mental health needs, of students, including children, adolescents, and young adults, for much of their professional life. Beyond that, they adopted two adorable cats a year ago whom they named Evelyn and Waymond, and they love anime, coffee, and powerlifting. So without further ado, I leave you with this episode.
All right, Jandel or Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be on.
Oh, sorry, what'd you say?
It's good to be on.
Do you want me to use Jay or Jandel during the recording?
You can use Jay. So I'm Jandel. I usually introduce myself by Jandel, but over the course of the years of my life, I've introduced myself a number of different ways. So Vin is very used to calling me Jay. Jay, Jandel, anything that approximates that name is fine. If you want to refer to me that way, I kind of just...
Me?
Yeah.
Cool. How are you doing this morning, Jay?
I am awake. Haven't had my morning coffee
Same.
yet, but I'm awake. And I'm really excited to be here, to be able to yap. I love yapping, so...
Oh, I know.
I'm here.
For the people that are watching the video, I wanted to highlight Jay's hoodie. Bay Area barbell. It has like a barbell on it with the San Francisco Bridge, like awesome on there.
Yep. I gotta start repping my gym life. One of my hobbies is still powerlifting, so I usually just buy the clothes and then start hitting the gym. So, yeah.
I love that. I also think like it's an underrated community space when you find like a local one, not like a corporate, franchise gym.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I used to go to a lot of like corporate gyms. Going to something that's more private and intimate is definitely a change. And it's also just like the way that I'm taking like lifting right now, it's beyond just like a obligation, but rather it is like part of my lifestyle. So it's cool to see like other people who take it like seriously like that. Not to say you can't do that in a corporate gym, but it's like it's nice.
Yeah. How long have you been working out or doing movement like that?
Oh, jeez. I've been an on and off lifter since like high school. I was never really much of a physical fitness person. I was very much an indoors play video games type of person. High school I had like weightlifting instead of regular gym, and I found that I actually had a pretty good inclination to just throwing weights around as a high schooler. I never really got committed to it until relatively recently. Excuse me. Maybe like 3 years ago when I started living with one of my former roommates in San Diego. He's a monster of a power lifter. He can like squat like 600 something pounds. So I wanted to keep movement up, but when I started going with him to his like private gym, I really got inspired by him and like all of the people there. So I have basically taken on like the identity of a powerlifter as well, and have been developing that. So really seriously, like maybe 3 years now.
Yeah. That's so cute. Like, you got a friend that is also super into it, so you get super into it, your friendship develops a different layer, you know?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It definitely like shaped our dynamic while we were living with each other. Because um, he was like super motivated, and he really helped me stay motivated with it because we would go to the gym together. Like he would, if I felt like not going, he'd be like, "Okay, go, let's go do it." And now I've kind of like internalized that too. So even now, like having moved to San Francisco and he's still in San Diego, we constantly check in with each other. Like, hey, like how are you doing? How are your lifts going? Right? Like, it's cool to still have like that dynamic and that connection. And I wouldn't have thought that I would be in the position that I am right now, given like where I came from. Yeah.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
Let's dial it back and give folks like a little bit of an intro of where you're from and everything. So, where did you grow up? I mean, you're currently in San Francisco. Lived in San Diego for a little bit, but yeah, where'd you grow up?
So I was born. Pardon. I was born in Los Angeles, where I lived for maybe 2 years or so, according to my mom, before moving into our home in a suburb in San Bernardino County, Fontana. It's like in the deserts of SoCal. Like if you've ever gone to
It's an
Las
hour
Vegas.
east of Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're like the road mark, or we're like a midway point for people to go to Las Vegas, basically. So if you've ever driven to Las Vegas from SoCal, you've gone to my hometown.
There's
Yeah.
only so many freeways that go that way.
Yes, for real. You have the whole desert after us, right? So growing up there was really interesting as like a Filipino-American. I grew up in a very Filipino household. Both of my parents were immigrants, but they had been here for maybe like a decade or so they were pretty acclimated. Maybe I don't have a reference.
Like before
point
they
for
had
pretty.
you?
Yes, before they had me, they'd been here for maybe like a decade or so, right?
And can I ask why did they come to the U.S.?
So, both of them came essentially for the American dream. My parents were not exactly the wealthiest people. My mom had like a multi-generational family with several siblings, with her being the oldest. And my father, I don't know where he is in terms of his siblings, but also very similarly. So their families, they weren't starving, but they weren't necessarily well off. And so both of them really wanted to come to America to, live that successful life, live that successful dream. And both of them ended up being like the only child from their family, at least initially, to come here. And so they've already told me stories about how they've grown up and how they've also lived here in America. I've kind of taken that in for myself and my own identity, but I think that comes like way later in the timeline. So I might ping pong back and forward, or unless you want me to go into it right now, like my family history.
I'm curious when did they meet? Did they
When-
meet in the Philippines or the U.S.?
It's a little bit of a scandalous story, but my mom and my father met in the Philippines. They dated for a little bit. They broke up, and then each of them went to America independently. And then they met up again and started dating again in America. And then sometime amount later, they had me. So
How did they find each other here, though? Like they both ended up in the Inland Empire, where you're from.
no, actually, I don't know where they. I think they both were in Los Angeles. Well, my mom was in San Francisco. My dad was in Los Angeles, but my mom still had ties to my dad's family because she was batchmates, like they classmates with my dad's brother. So
Okay.
I think like word just kind of spread, right? When my mom immigrated to America, that went to her family, who went to my dad's brother, who went to my dad, who then was like, "Oh, you're here."
Did you
Um,
know?
yeah, and then that's how they kind of reconnected. Um,
Got you.
there's a lot to the story, but that's basically like the gist of it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Has it
and mhm.
how's it been like asking them questions about this like past?
That's a good question. Um, it it really makes me feel a deeper connection to my identity as like a Filipino-American. Um, and I really feel like both parts of that identity, Filipino-American.
Hmm.
So for context, my family when I was born, they opted to only speak in English. They wanted me to assimilate, to be successful in the American education system, to have the success, to have like the life that they didn't necessarily have. I mean, my parents are by no means unsuccessful. Um, my dad at the time was working at a science laboratory, and then my mom was working as a accountant and has continued to work as an accountant. Um, and so jointly, we were a middle class family, right? Um, but it was still kind of a struggle because they also were sending a lot of remittance back to the Philippines. So
For people that don't know, what's a remittance, Jay?
it's basically just, hey, we're making money here in America, we're going to send money back home. Or we might send goods that are cheaper here in America and send them back home to our families.
In the
And
boxes?
in the balikbayan boxes, which is, yeah,
Balikbayan boxes.
yes. And for all y'all, Filipino families tend to be very, very big. We have a huge extended families, and we tend to take care of each other. Or maybe I should just speak for my own family. Like my family is very big on both sides, and so the remittances there were also equally as big. Um, but growing up in that context, right, where I'm English only, um, English programming on like TV, um, I felt like I grew very American, right? Um, I did get bits and pieces of like Filipino culture, but really like my immersion was like in the American education system, in American society, so on and so forth, right? And I'm also gonna have to define American later, but asking them these questions later on, it reminded me of like that connection that I have to the home, to like the Philippines, and it also reminded me of like how I take kind of, and I'm kind of scatterbrained because there's a lot of different stuff that comes down. Um,
That happens when you're talking about like family history.
yeah, if I have to gather myself, it's just how thankful I am to my parents, how appreciative I have of the privileges I have as an American, but also how being Filipino is still very intrinsically tied to me and the amount of care that I have for that. Because when I'm asking these questions for my mom and my dad, it was awe-inspiring, and it was, I'll leave it at that for now, awe-inspiring, because they told me about difficulties that I couldn't have imagined. Like my mom, she described like one of her first jobs was working for a family friend of hers, and she was like a cleaner, right? Her degree, I believe she got a degree in accounting in the Philippines, wasn't worth anything here in America when she immigrated. So she was
Because it
working
doesn't
on remote.
transfer over as within the university systems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and jobs don't lend much credence to it. So, um, my mom would tell the story about how when she was working her first job, she was cleaning bathrooms, and her boss would turn on like the hot water and make the place steam up and make her clean it again, and they would be laughing while she was doing this, right? And she had to endure that for, I never asked for how long, right? But that was like her experience, right? Hearing these types of stories, like when I look at when I looked at my family then and now, I'm like, man, like they have kind of clawed their ways to get to here, right? And that's made me more appreciative of them, and it makes me appreciative of how they really pushed to be where they are. But it's a complicated feeling, right? The feeling that, well, you had to go through this abuse to get to where you are, right? Like they were promised an American dream.
Get me here.
Yeah, essentially, they wanted me to get like all the privileges of being an American, which I did, because I haven't gone through like the same type of abuse that my mom or my dad has, right? To have to immigrate here, so there's definitely like conflict and complicated feelings, with that.
Yeah.
It's been good though, like going to the root of the question. I felt like asking these questions to my family was super important to help me understand like how I am here, right? What kind of legacy I'm bringing with myself.
Yeah. I'm glad you can ask, because it's not something everyone can. Some people haven't healed enough from their past to be able to share it with their children. But I know it's complicated because you have to like reconcile the parent that they are and also their experiences. So like they might parent you a certain way and it's super annoying, especially when we're teenagers or whatever. And then you're like, oh, you went through all of that, so I would never be in that position. But you're still kind of overbearing, Mom.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. These questions came because of an assignment, not because of any personal curiosity, quite honestly, right? Like, this was, I believe, an undergraduate when I started asking these questions, and then over the course of my education, I had to, like, revisit and ask about my past. The reason why I can talk about my mom's experiences easier is that she has definitely healed. My dad has been more of a stonewall with respect to that, because he has gone through stuff that he really, like, if I try to prod it a little bit, he gets very angry and upset, right? Like, I don't want to talk about it. But it does kind of recontextualize how I grew up, right? Like, how they were with me when I was younger. Yeah.
And that you also didn't get to know to ask these questions when you were growing up, because you said you started like, in undergrad, so like later in your adult life. So if you hadn't asked, I feel like they also might not have shared it with you, because I think it's not in their nature to share it as they were growing up with you, which I think would be a more quote unquote normal, whatever that means, right?
Maybe. It's just maybe it is, right? It felt like this history feels so far removed from my initial perceptions of my family, because we were solidly middle class, right?
Yeah.
That I never imagined that, oh, this is the heritage that we have, right? Oh, this is the past that we have. I mean, I have gone to the Philippines. I've seen how a family looks like in the Philippines. Because I think we would also be considered maybe middle class in the Philippines. I'm not sure. I don't have like a good reference point there. But it wouldn't have come to me naturally, because I just look at my family, I just assumed as a kid, like, oh, this is how it's always been,
Yeah.
You never really think about it until later on. And even at that, it was because a class prompted me to, rather than, me coming to the realization of, how did this happen, right? And to your point, yeah, might not have been in their mind to tell me about this past, right? Because they are very focused on the present. Like, yeah.
Yeah, get that. Thanks for taking that little segue into like your parents' family history and stuff.
Oh, of course. The initial question was like how I grew up, right?
Yeah. What was growing up in after you moved from LA into like Riverside, SoCal?
Yeah. I said that I had to put a pin on how I would define as American, and this is kind of where it comes in. Fontana, San Bernardino County is a very, very predominantly like Latine populace, right? And so growing up, I grew up with a bunch of like Latine people, Latinx people. Most of my friends were like Mexican or other like Latinx descent. And so even though I grew up in like this American culture, and American culture maybe as a kid might be defined as the American education system and being used to that, American media like TV and stuff like that, right? I spoke pure English, not a shred of Tagalog. But when I was inside of like the spaces, I also felt very different, right? Because I was one of the few like Pacific Islander, Southeast Asian people in our communities, and that was very apparent.
When you say few, how few were there of you?
In terms of Filipinos, maybe like there might be like another one, or
Damn.
like two maybe at most.
No more than 5?
Yeah, no more than 5.
Dang.
Clearly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We might have like pockets of people. I'm just guesstimating here, right? But like I want to say it'd be like 80% Latinx in our schools, something like that, right? And then it would just be a handful of everything else, right? And so you really feel that difference even within like those communities. Like I remember one of my childhood bullies, really funny dude. I never really perceived like the bullying, but he would always like name call and insult me. But he would call me Chino, or like Chinese, right? And throughout my time growing up, there were many like different jokes about me being Asian thrown about, right? Being good at math, having an accent, like...
Did you have an accent?
Did I have an accent? I might. Just as a small aside, I got language from my parents, right? I think my parents sometimes overgeneralized certain words. Like, anything that you could pull on and open and store stuff in was a drawer to me. I didn't know what a cabinet was. I never called it a cabinet. It was a drawer, right? Or like, there was
just live in a world of drawers, Jay.
Because that's how I grew up. Or there's just like certain words that I would just pronounce off because I would hear my parents say it, and that was what was reinforced. I can't think of any at the moment, but I've been called out multiple times. Like, maybe it's just like kid things. Maybe it isn't just like an accent. But one of the ones that I remember is like I used to pronounce disturbed as desturbed, but So
I love this. I love this story.
Yeah. So I may not have an accent, but I mean, whenever people would be joking around, like, sometimes they might pull up like the stereotypical Asian accent to like mock me, right? Which is all good in the time. And it was, my relationship to that was really interesting because I feel like I really internalized that, model minority Asian American identity, right? Because I was very proud of my academic prowess at the time. And it in a way made me feel the sense of community. It sounds kind of
With
twisted,
Asians that you didn't
yeah.
really have around you, you're like, at least I'm one of these model minority Asians.
Yeah, because it was like at least it's a positive thing, right? Like I can kind of laugh at that.
Right.
At least people know me as like a smart kid. Like I'll take it. Um, I mean, when I was younger, it really was like trying to find a sense of identity, finding a sense of belonging, right? And like looking at it now, it's like yeah, I was very different to my peers in terms of like my upbringing, my background. Um, because yeah, like Philippine culture was very distinct, right? In many cases, distinct enough for many other students to make that distinction for me, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Like, what kind
so
of distinctions or differences did you see?
um, I think many of the students having that shared like second language, Spanish, was like really big.
Excuse me.
No worries, bless you. Um, like they had like a shared language that oftentimes I would be left out in conversations, right, during that time. That actually pushed me to start learning Tagalog too, kind of like as a side story. But um, I had, sorry, I'm ping ponging a little bit here. I
It's okay.
I used to visit like the Philippines relatively frequently, and I have like cousins there that I really love, and they also spoke Tagalog. But during that time, even though I couldn't speak their language and they couldn't speak mine, we had like a grand old time, right? Like as kids do. So I
We
think
find a way to communicate in other ways, you know? It's like,
absolutely,
you
yeah,
could do this thing with me.
yeah,
Like, no, like just hand motions and just like pulling each other along.
yeah, for sure. And so I think around 10 or 11 years old, I started deliberately practicing Tagalog in my household. And I didn't really have formal education um, in learning. I just started mimicking what I was hearing. I started listening. I started staying in the conversations that my parents would have. And eventually they were like, crap, we can't hide what we're saying to this kid anymore. Because I was starting to pick up everything, yeah. Um,
But did they,
and,
so they obviously didn't teach you, but you
yeah.
started like trying to learn it because, you know, your cousins, when you would visit, like, you needed to find a way to communicate with them. You
Yeah.
wanted to be able to like speak a second language like your other classmates who were like Latina and like had
Yeah.
that connection. But your parents, did they like were they supportive of you trying to learn, or like what did that look like?
I mean, I don't think they explicitly supported it. Of course, like if I asked questions like, how do you say this in Tagalog, right? Um, they would answer that question. But really, a lot of it was just my own efforts of really immersing myself in the language. Um, the way that I speak Tagalog right now is like an elementary kid. Like, you know, you overgeneralize words, your grammar is off. I have like a really heavy accent that they always point out. Um, but I really strove to like learn language. I think
Yeah,
like
but you're trying, Jay, and
yeah,
you're self-try. Like you, this is a lot of self-motivation because you came for my birthday and my mom spoke with you, and my mom did mention like that your accent and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, well, Jay's parents didn't teach them, so like, what do you expect? Like they're trying to do that on their own.
yeah. No, it was an effort starting from like 11. For like Spanish speakers, if y'all speak Spanish, the context for how my language might work might be something like, uh, yo eres de Estados Unidos, right? Like I might use like a verb form wrong, or I might just continually use the same like verb form in
Right.
incorrect places. I think verbs is like the easiest way to think about it because I definitely do that.
But
Or
generally, I
yeah,
understand what you're trying to get at. You know, when you
yeah,
speak
yeah, yeah,
Tagalog.
yeah. That's the context.
Yeah.
But walking it back, even with that language that I learned, I think one of the things that I have felt, even now, is that many times I don't really have people to converse with in the outside world, right? Much in the same way that, you know, you can find Spanish speakers around basically anywhere, right? and we all have the shared language of English. But like there's like this connection I have to like that home language that in school, even when I learned Tagalog, I never got to use, right? I never had to have like those intimate conversations with my friends that I perceived other people to be able to do. And so I really, at any moment that I had like at home or in the outside world, if I could speak Tagalog, I wanted to speak Tagalog because I don't know, there is that kind of connection to that identity and that community. So language was like
we
one of
could
the
speak
biggest
more
things.
Tagalog together, Jay.
Oh, absolutely! I'm so down for that. Trust.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, that there's a constant state of feeling different as a kid, right? And I did latch on to like the generic, stereotypical Asian identity because, hey, at least I might have that community with other people, if not that specific connection to like being a Filipino-American, right? And at least it was positive. Other stuff about me growing up, man, I was just like a really introverted kid. I was very,
Whoa.
I was very.
You're such a social butterfly now, it's so hard for me to imagine that.
Okay, look. I can be a social butterfly, and that's because for those listening, right, Vin was the extrovert who adopted me in college and forced me multiple times to go to social situations when I was like, please, Lord, let me stay inside. Being able to interact with people right now is a coping mechanism. It is a survival instinct, okay?
I adopt a lot of introverts, and I always thought that I was like kind of introverted. I think I'm just naturally quiet, but I'm not introverted.
Yeah.
I adopt a bunch of you, and then you tell me that I've adopted you, and I was like, wait, I'm the extrovert in this situation?
The amount of times it's like, hey, I'm going to go see this person at this time. Hey, I'm going to go do this at this time. And internally, I'm just like, I just want to stay at home and like play video games. And well, here I am. Wow, look, club. And that was kind of that was kind of my experience growing up. But I didn't have an extrovert to kind of pull me along. So many times when I was younger, I would stay indoors. I would play a lot of video games. I would watch anime. So and I had like friends in school, of course. And all we would do is like talk and chill. Yeah, so there was a lot of that.
What animes did you watch, by the way?
Oh boy. During that time, when I was younger, I mean, my first favorite show was like Naruto, because I was there for when it originally released.
What'd you like about it?
I think the same reasons why people like Demon Slayer and like other like battle anime now, right? Like it was just cool. It was sick. It was just watching people beat up each other, right? It's kind of like how as a kid you'd be like, no, I have this super special ability. No, you have this super special ability. You know, I loved that as a kid. And it kind of branched off. Like I liked a lot of different anime. It kind of consumed me at the time. And it defined a good part of me for a lot of my life. So yeah, that's how I kind of grew up as a kid. Introverted. I had like the sense of difference. I was pretty good at academics. I actually hated math, despite identifying with the Asian American stereotype. I liked reading and writing more. And yeah.
And what was we haven't gotten into this too much yet, but how were you parented, I guess?
How was I parented? It kind of lends itself to like the Asian American identity. My mom was a very loving and permissive parent for the most part. She was very supportive, perhaps maybe a little too supportive and too lenient at times, but it was kind of a counterbalance to my father. My father was very much a disciplinarian, right? He wanted nothing less than an A. Because I remember that as a kiddo, whenever I would get like a B, it was just like even trending towards like middle school. Like if I got a B, I would start crying because I already knew like, okay, yeah, I'm getting it. I'm getting it when I get home.
Dang.
Yeah. He was extremely strict. So that's it. That's like in terms of academics, they really only had like expectations like that on me. Everything else was like, okay, you can do whatever else you want so long as you get grades. At least according to my father. So my mom would let me indulge in video games. Like she would buy stuff for me there. They tried getting me to a bunch of extracurriculars. Like I was in Boy Scouts. I was in karate. They bought a piano for me, but then they never got me a teacher, so I never really learned how to play piano. But they
The piano that's in your living room?
no. It was an older
Oh,
piano.
okay.
Like they just bought a piano and they expected me to learn it somehow without having a teacher for it. They wanted me. They wanted me to be a little genius, but I think they were a little less strict, and so I was able to get away of it. Though I say that, but I got to like the second to last rank for Boy Scouts, and then for karate, I mean I didn't get a black belt, but I think it was like a red belt, so I was pretty far into it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I never really took them that seriously, so maybe I'm just taking it for granted. I don't really feel like that's like a core aspect of my identity. But I mean, aside from those two pursuits, basically home was just video games, study, eat, sleep. That's kind of like the parenting that I grew up in. And then every Sunday we would go to church.
Catholic?
So that's Catholic church, yes, Catholic mass. It's really funny because my dad would not take the mass seriously at all, so he would be playing with me during the mass, and my mom would be telling us to be quiet. But yeah, that was the parenting. To kind of transition a little bit, again, parenting definitely changed like in middle school too, because during middle school my parents had divorced, and that was like a whole other thing in and of itself.
How did they
oh, go ahead.
How did they tell you, and like how did you process it?
They did not tell me.
Oh.
I think
What?
Yeah, in that the first I knew that there was conflict was that they were like explosively fighting, like a super heated argument, and then they were like sleeping in separate rooms, and I didn't really have an inkling to what was going on until that point. And they kind of went back and forward for this until eventually they said, yeah, we're divorcing, we're splitting up, and it kind of made sense at the time, right? Like, it did not come as a shocker to me once they told me that. It was like the separation before, because they started to live separately before they officially divorced. My father ended up leaving the household. My mom basically got full custody of me. I shouldn't say full custody, maybe like 90% custody. I would go to my dad's house like every other weekend, but that wouldn't be established until like a couple years after the fact. So at that point, my mom was like a solo parent, for the most part. And that time, it really was like a hands-off situation, wherein my mom would be working and trying to keep the household afloat because my dad was no longer there.
Was
So
she
I was
working
responsible.
more? Sorry.
Oh, she was. I think she was working about the same. This might be a good question. It's like, how did you manage like the finances shift after my father left? But because she was processing like the divorce and what had happened, and her own feelings and work and keeping the house alive, really I was left to do what like school and everything else. My grandparents were also living at this were living with us at this time. My grandparents were my mom's side, so they'd be babysitting me. My mom or my grandma, my Lola, she would help like cook meals and stuff. So like my basic like living necessities were like taken care of by like my mom and my grandparents. But in terms of like doing stuff for school or basically anything aside from, basically everything else was like self-driven. Like I had to do, even until like when I was applying for colleges, I did the whole college application process. I did like registering for the SATs. I did like the tax forms for like FAFSA, right? And all I would do is just ask mom, hey, can you please fill this out, and I'll do everything else. I had to do and learn a lot of things for myself, which was also very difficult when you're also processing like, wow, like my family got split apart. So
It's a lot of division of labor too, because like your mom didn't have the the generational information to help you with the applications and stuff, but she basically only had energy to like pay for the bills. And then I'm glad at least like your grandparents were there to help with like the nurture part,
yeah,
since
yeah.
like that got, like separated with your parents' divorce. And yeah, as first gen, figuring all that stuff to apply for college is a nightmare, because you're trying to prove to your parents that this is a legal document. I'm not just giving our social security number away to some random company.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really here, like, if I look at these events in retrospect, it's like, yeah, my mom doesn't have the cultural capital to understand, like,
Yes.
what the heck a college application is, what a FAFSA application is. Like, how do you navigate that system? I mean, I don't think my mom really knew how to like navigate the high school or middle school or elementary system, quite honestly, and that's why like that was essentially
All you?
all me. Yeah, especially now that she had to like figure out finances and stuff on her own. And so that was definitely an adjustment. And I learned a lot. I had to learn how to be self-sufficient in a lot of different ways. Yeah. The reflecting back that I'm just like, dang, that's just crazy. Like me being able to get to the edge, like to college, was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my school counselors weren't that helpful either. Really, like the only way I learned was like I had a couple of friends from like my AP classes, and I would just listen to what they were doing. I'm like, okay, I should just go do that too, right? And then when I
Fellow
didn't
immigrant children helping each other out.
yeah, and then when I didn't know, I learned how to Google stuff. Lord,
Yep.
Google was my best friend. Uh, so it's kind of crazy to reflect and think about that. Yeah, yeah, that kind of transitions me to like young adulthood. So
Yeah.
if you have any questions for that.
I mean, I think it's just wild. I did want to ask, one quick follow-up was,
Yeah.
before the divorce and then after, like, what was your relationship with your dad like?
Ooh, that's a spicy question.
Spice.
It is spicy.
Yeah.
I have a pretty dark sense of humor. I think at some point
It's coping mechanism.
every Oh yeah, it's definitely a coping mechanism. But I think I can summarize it where if anybody mentions fathers, I'll just look at them like, huh? What's that?
Did you say something?
Huh? What's that? Crazy.
Thought I heard a
But
whisper in the wind.
yeah, but in truth, like my relationship with my father has been on and off. Currently, we're not talking, and I have like my own chosen family, right? In that, I do have like my mom, my grandparents, but I also have like a lot of close friends that I consider essentially like family. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at with like my relationship with my father. There was like a lot of like on and off stuff because there's a lot of trying to negotiate like where we were. Um, but at least right now, the feel that I have is that there are other people in my life that are very important to me that I want to put more time to.
I feel that. And that's okay, you know? Like, we do what we can with what we have, or we also create it for ourselves over time as we figure out our needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you started talking about college applications and stuff, so let's talk about that. Where'd you end up going?
So I ended up going to UCSD. Ended up going to the same college as Vin here. ERC, Eleanor Roosevelt College for all y'all who went to UCSD. If you know, you know. I went to. I don't want to explain how UCSD works. It's weird.
I did in a previous one, so people will have some kind of understanding.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
So I went for a bachelor's degree in psychology, and eventually picked up a education minor. College was interesting. I went into psychology because, during high school, I was like the unofficial counselor of my friends. Like I at the time.
Early roles. Okay.
Yeah, early roles. A lot of people would come to me for like advice or to be heard out and listened to, and I became very in tune with that, like being able to notice, like where people are hurting and stuff like that. I miss the story because this was one story I wanted to talk about in high school, but one of my formative like core memories was that one of my best friends at the time, I was tutoring him in like a class. I think it was English or something. I was an AP student. He was a regular class student, right? And
I love how you hesitated not knowing what a regular English class was because we were in APs.
yeah,
You're like,
well,
regular class student.
Yeah, I mean, I put it in quote because it's like it's insult. I feel like it's insulting, but
No, it's not good.
yeah. Well, anyways, I was like tutoring him, and one of the things that he said to me was like, you're the first person who's treated me like I'm not stupid. This was in like high school, right? And I've really carried that. Like it's been years. It's been more than a decade, right? We're like a decade and a half of holding that quote. But I kind of held that, and I think about like, well, how is it like to live your whole life where everybody thinks that you're stupid, right? How is it for people that go through like that kind of suffering, that kind of identity of like, wow, I guess I am stupid, or I guess I am like this or like that. So I went into psychology because I wanted to start helping people. I had that drive of like, I don't want somebody else to feel like they're stupid, to feel like they're like this or like that. But what you quickly learn in college is that, at least in UCSD, because it was so research oriented, the human element felt missing. I actually learned to resent my major because it was a lot of stuff that, quite truth be told, like I was reading like psychology textbooks in high school because I was so interested in the topic. I'm like, I could have learned this on my own. I know it's pretentious.
This is so on brand. Like, listen, I'm already doing everything else on my own. I don't need you to teach me this nonsense and pay for this degree but this way.
Yeah, because I had this expectation of like I'm going to be working with people and I'm going to be doing the stuff I want to do, but that wasn't the case. You know, I didn't get anything remotely to that. The education minor was actually a turning point because a random general ed class that I took in my third year, last quarter, was teaching at a school. And I was like, okay, sounds cool. Like, you know, I tutored before, so why not, right? The school placement that I ended up going to was a high school where the population was mostly refugee students. I went out of my way to pick out this placement site because I thought it was super cool. I did not have a car. I was not driving at the time. Public transport was like an hour and a half one way. But that was one of the most rewarding things that I ever got to do because I was like, I remember I was working in the class for newly migrated refugees students, and I specifically was working with one student. His name was Abdik Kadir. Never forgot this dude. He was from Somalia, and he hadn't learned like double-digit addition and subtraction. That's what we were working on for like a whole quarter, right? And that experience was humbling, and it also gave me what I was wanting. It was like actually doing work that could be helpful for people, for the world. And so I hard pivoted into education. Like I felt like that reinvigoration to become a teacher, right? Because I felt like, wow, I'm directly impacting people's lives here. And so my whole fourth year was just education studies, and I was able to get that done. And I graduated wanting to be a teacher. But it actually ended up not going that way. So, I know I've been building up education this whole time, but actually there's a twist.
Oh.
I was building up education, but there was a twist because I didn't go that route. So to kind of skirt the details, after college, I was dealing with like the heartbreak of a really significant relationship. No, Vin, but ask questions about this one.
College heartbreaks, yo.
Yeah, no, that was
different because you're like more of an adult, you know, and you're like, I thought I had this.
Yeah, no, that one cut deep. That was also my first significant relationship, so there was multiple layers to that.
Yeah.
I was recovering from heartbreak. I was supposed to go into a master's school for education, and I ended up not going because I was just like I couldn't do it. I didn't have like the emotional capacity to do it right after school. So I took a gap year. One gap year became two became three, because I just started taking care of myself. So I took first year was really like taking care of myself after graduation, because graduation was a little rough, breakup was a little rough, and I started doing a tutoring job on the side, which I ended up working at for a while. During that tutoring job, as I was teaching students, what I noticed was that I could teach content and I can make students feel more confident about themselves with like the content that they came for work or for help, right? But there were many things that I wanted to help them with that because it wasn't my role, I couldn't touch, right? Some of my students would come in and they would be depressed. Some of my students would come in and they would come in with, hey, here's this thing that happened to me and my family, or here's this thing that happened to my friends, or man, I have like this crushing anxiety about like this or that, right? And as a teacher, as a tutor, I could only be like, well, let's go focus on our work again, right? At least within that company. And I realized that I was doing a lot of good work. I could see, like, when I was working with students, that they would be more confident in themselves, that they would be able to take a lot of what they were learning. But this ultimately wasn't truly what I wanted to work with either, right? I wanted to work with that, with the mental health aspect, right? With, like, hey, I am feeling sad, I am feeling depressed, I am feeling anxious, this and that. And so I career changed.
Technically, you went back, right? A little bit to psychology and everything.
Yes. And that was also its own convoluted path. I went to...
for clarity,
yes.
for folks,
Yes.
because you didn't like what approach psychology had in your undergrad, and that was because it was like research-based and not working enough with people?
Yeah. I didn't get to work with any people in my psychology career, right? Like, or at least my undergraduate career. I was able to do like a lab, 2 labs. One of them was education, one of them was psychology. Psychology/education, actually. And that's also kind of what pushed me to education. But apart from those 2 labs, no real work with people. That's really what killed my passion for it, because my perception was, if this is all that psychology is, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. You remember how I had to, like, learn everything by myself? I did not do research. I did not understand, like, the greater possibilities that were open to me in undergraduate, right? I didn't understand that I could explore, like, different pathways. Nobody really taught me how to, like, think about, here's what you have to do in order to get to where you want to go, right? I didn't really have mentors apart from, like, people in the education studies program who really gave me a direction as to, like, oh, you can do this, you can do that, you can find yourself here, you can find yourself there, right? And so a lot of my decisions were immature, and they weren't really focused, because it was me just stumbling around, just trying to figure out where I fit, right?
Yeah.
Something I wish I could go back and deal with, but I mean, it's part of my journey.
It's also like some professors in different departments, it depends on the department, right? Like, are these professors here because they're required to teach as part of, like, you know, getting their research funded, or are they teaching because they actually like teaching, right? And they like engaging with students. So if you don't get a professor that thinks in that way, they're not going to look at you as, like, a person that they could help answer, like, some of these questions that you probably had.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. But I think it's even more fundamental than that too, right? My mom doesn't know how to get me to be a therapist or to work with people, right? And I didn't really have people who could really point me in that direction, or at least I didn't know how to tap into those resources to help me to get to that direction, right? The most that I got was, like, here's how you get to your degree, but I was never given that, here's how you get to, like, the career that you're imagining. No one really talked to me about that, right? And so that's why, like, I'm currently in a doctoral program for clinical psychology, spoiler alert, but when I was in undergraduate, there was an option to study clinical psychology within our school, but I was like, clinical psychology, that sounds like not what I want to do. I don't want to make people into problems, right? I had no clue what clinical psychology meant, right? Maybe it's on me. Maybe I should have done the research or stuff more, but I also want to give myself credit in that I was a teenager trying to figure out everything at that point, right? I already just finished, like, figuring out FAFSA and, like, the college application system. Like, you know, I didn't know. There was just a lot of things I just didn't know, right? So that's why my pathway was, like, a slow movement into where I feel like I should be. Because, yeah, before my PhD program right now, I was in a master's program that I graduated from. This master's program was for school counseling. School counseling in my mind was, yeah, school counselors are cool. They're supposed to, like, help students with, like, their mental health stuff, right? And then I'm still in the education system. I think that would be cool. Like I love students. My passion still is like adolescents and young adults, like within the school system, and making stuff more accessible there. But school counselors, I learned, actually don't get to do the work that I want to do. They have a bunch of red tape. They're not able to do therapy, and a lot of their roles go into a bunch of other different spaces that weren't necessarily my passion point. Now, I'll say school counselors are super important. School counseling is a great job. I'm not discounting it, right? It's very critical in the school infrastructure. But for me, it really was, I want to do therapy and I want to do mental health. And so after graduating from that master's program, I started applying to graduate schools. Again, for clinical psychology. And that was like a arduous journey in itself because I only applied to one school. Ill-advised. I got rejected from that one school. Very fun. But then they said, hey, you can apply to our other branches. And then I got into one of their other branches. And then that's how I'm here today. It's a lot of bumbling. It's a lot of luck. I know I kind of ran through like this part of my life. But I think like the highlight here was just trying to find myself and really just like going through a lot of like growth and development, right? Like doing real life work, being like, okay, this is not what I want to. Going to a master's program, spending over $100,000, and then realizing, no, this is not the work that I want to do, right? And then eventually coming to the program that I am right now. And here I really feel like, well, I am really growing and I'm really doing the work that I want to do. That journey has been one with a lot of twists and turns, a lot of unknowns and I don't knows. And I think of myself as very fortunate to have found myself where I am right now, right? Though check in with me in like 2 years. Maybe I might have changed my mind there too. But
when you have your doctorate, I'll be like, Jay, so how you feel now?
I need to get another one.
I need 2 more, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. But no, walking through all of my journey right now, there's just I can recognize and see like, man, like I didn't know a lot of things, and I had to figure out a lot of things for my own. And even until like 2-3 years ago, I was committing myself to decisions that weren't actually going to pan out, right? Which on the one hand, I could say like, man, I wish I didn't spend that $100,000, or I wish I did not spend how many years doing this or that. But I also come to realize that, hey, like this is like my path, and I also took a lot of different experiences from everywhere that I went to bring it to where I am right now. Yeah.
And you ultimately made the best decisions that you could with the information and experience that you had. I think like you're a couple years younger than me, so you're not even like 30 yet, and it sounds like a lot of winding, but I don't think you even hit your halfway point in life because you're still gonna, average lifespan is like 78 these days with modern technology and everything. So you still have so much more time than you have, and people often feel very rushed to the side, but you can change your mind a lot.
Well, and I'm also able to appreciate all the places that were challenging, that did not end up going anywhere, right? Like, sure, I might not take my experiences with education, tutoring with me, but the passion that I have for like the student populace and the experiences that I've had that inform where I want to be right now, not to mention that I know that I've already left like a positive impact on people. Like my vision for myself is I want to be like that kind of ripple effect where like the people I help can go and help other people and go and make the world a better place. I know, naive and idealistic as it might come off as, but I sincerely believe in that vision. And so even though like tutoring might have been looked at as wasted years at one point, because I definitely felt like that at one point, looking at it now, it's like, well, I grew and I also did what I wanted to, right? I achieved what I wanted to do there. And I'm able to reflect and be able to appreciate that, that time was something that was valuable for me. Same thing with my master's, even though I'm not using it anymore. There was a lot of stuff there that I have taken in that informs who I am today, right? I've never necessarily felt that rush. No, that's cap. I have felt that rush. But every step of my journey, at least I can say for now, every step of my journey has been integral to be where I am right now, right? And how I show up and how I present and how I come to the spaces that I go to right now is because of everything I've gone through. And to that extent, I don't think I've wasted time to get to be here, nor do I feel like I'm here too late, right? As a 29-year-old. I'm very proud of the history that I have now. And I'm also very proud of how I'm going to continue moving forward in the future.
I'm proud of you, Jay.
Thanks. Fa. Anyways.
So, Jay, what would you call this current chapter of your life?
I would say I think right now, digesting that question, I hesitate to use the word chapter. Because chapter implies a stage. I feel like many parts of my narrative have been building up to where it is right now. And I feel like this chapter of my life is just a mere extension or continuation of that. But if I had to pick a chapter...
That's what chapters tend to be.
You ever read a book without chapters? You ever read a...
No! It's a run-on sentence, Jay.
Don't use run-on sentence with me. I was an English teacher, okay? But... I mean, this chapter really is... probably just... Oh God, what does it mean to be a healthcare worker? That's how I'm... That's the sincere feeling that I have right now. What is it like to be a doctoral student? It's definitely, in terms of my professional development, the most challenging chapter of my life, but also the most rewarding within that professional growth, and within many spaces of personal growth. Because high school me did not understand what it meant to be a therapist, did not know what it meant to be a psychologist, right? If they knew what I had to do now, they might have been scared off easily. So, but yeah, that would probably be what I'd name my chapter now.
I like that. And why don't you leave us with one last message for our listeners?
I don't want to sound pretentious, man. I'm still living my life. I'm still growing. I'm gonna look back 5 years from now and be like, I said that? But I guess it is embracing where you're at. Reflecting on what I said right now, embracing where you're at. Right? I might feel unworthy currently. I'm processing this feeling of feeling unworthy to leave a final message for people. Right? But I mean, this is where I'm at right now. And I'm able to... I'm trying. I'm able to, and I'm trying to accept that as it stands, right? Here's where I am. Here's my life experience. Here's what I can say to people right now. Here's what I can do right now. And I think that for many people, no matter what age you are, no matter where you're at, right, being able to accept that this is where I'm at right now. This is what I can do right now, right? I think that would be really helpful. Isn't that right, Wayman? Yes, sir.
Oh, your cat. I didn't realize your cat was up on your laptop.
Oh no, he just jumped up. I think he wants outside, so But yeah, I haven't been paying attention, but yeah, my cats were in the background too.
Oh yeah, the other cat's on the window ledge.
Yes. So
Love that. Well,
yeah,
Jay.
that would be my final point.
Huh?
But yeah, that's my final point. So
Yeah.
go for it.
I mean, I think we're a lot more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And I really loved hearing your story today, so thanks for sharing with everybody.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Is there any way you'd like people to stay in touch with you or follow anything you're doing?
I don't have much of anything in terms of my social media and stuff. If you search me up for LinkedIn, I believe, you will find currently a LinkedIn that I made in undergraduate and never updated. So maybe you can take a look at that.
We can work on that if you want.
I definitely, my school has been yelling at me for it. So that might be the case. But I mean, I'm sure that, listeners, if you reach out to Vin to connect, then I'd be more than happy to do that too.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Jay. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Creating Your Conditions, a work of understanding conditions we are given, forged from, and we have yet to face. You can follow us on Instagram at Creating Your Conditions, which you can also find in the description of this episode. My name is Van, and it's been my pleasure to be your host. Keep creating, and I'll catch you in the next episode.